All right, let's dive in. We've got some fascinating excerpts here from How to Read a Book by Mortimer J. Adler and Charles Van Doren.
Yeah.
And I think this deep dive could totally change the way we approach reading, from now on.
It might, yeah. I think what's so powerful about this book,
Yeah,
is that it challenges this assumption that we all know how to read.
right, exactly. Like we learn the ABCs and we read street science and news articles, but are we really getting the most out of every single book we pick up?
That's the big question. That's what Adler and Van Doren are pushing us to think about, right?
Yeah.
They argue that there's this huge difference between just reading words on a page
Yeah.
and truly understanding what an author is trying to say.
Okay.
And that a lot of us, even if we've gone through years of school, haven't actually been taught how to unlock that deeper level.
So are they saying that we've been reading wrong this whole time?
I'm not necessarily wrong, but maybe not as effectively. Like they introduce this idea of reading for information versus reading for understanding.
Okay.
It's like, think about it this way. Reading a news article just to get the facts, that's like grabbing a quick snack, right?
Mm-hmm.
But reading a book to truly understand its arguments and all the nuances, that's like sitting down for like a gourmet meal.
I like that.
Both have their place,
Right.
but they need different approaches.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And they offer totally different levels of like intellectual nourishment.
Okay, yeah, I see what you mean. But I gotta admit,
Yeah.
this whole idea that there's a right way to read kind of makes me nervous,
Oh, yeah.
Like, is there some secret code I've been missing out on?
Don't worry. It's not about like a secret code.
Oh.
It's more about developing certain habits and techniques
Gotcha.
that help you become a more active and insightful reader.
Okay, well, that's a relief.
Yeah.
I'm definitely curious to hear more. One of the excerpts you sent over really stuck with me.
Oh.
It's the one where they talk about teaching this class. And the students insisted they read a complex essay by John Locke.
Oh, I remember that one. Yeah.
Right? They could even, repeat phrases from it.
Right.
But when Adler asked them to actually explain the core concepts, define the key terms, they were totally lost.
Totally.
Like they skimmed the surface but didn't absorb anything,
Exactly. And it's so relatable.
Oh, absolutely.
How many times have we finished a book and a week later can't remember anything?
Hey, all the time.
Our minds are like leaky buckets.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Which brings us to one of their big ideas, active reading.
Yeah.
They actually suggest that if you're not mentally tired after reading, you probably haven't been working hard enough.
I love that.
Right? It's like reading shouldn't be passive, but this dynamic back and forth,
It's like a mental workout.
Exactly. So instead of letting words just wash over us, we should be constantly questioning, analyzing, connecting it to what we already know.
Engaging with the text.
Exactly. And they give some pretty practical advice, too, like don't be afraid to mark up your books.
Yeah. Underline right in the margins.
Make it your own.
Exactly.
I used to be so against writing at books.
Oh, I know.
Felt wrong. But the more I think about it, the more it makes sense.
Right.
If we're really engaging, we should leave our mark.
Absolutely. And those notes become so valuable, You can always go back to them.
Right, like a record of your thoughts.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, I am sold on active reading. What else do they have?
Well, another really insightful concept is structural reading,
Okay.
which is basically understanding how the book is put together, like how the different parts relate to each other
Okay.
and how they all contribute to the author's main argument,
They use the analogy of a house, which I thought was so smart.
Oh, yeah, I love that one.
You've got the foundation, the walls, the roof. All these pieces make a unified structure.
Exactly. And just like you wouldn't wander randomly through a house.
Yeah.
Structural reading is about understanding how the different parts of a book, the chapters, sections, paragraphs, how they fit together.
So how do we actually do that? I could usually follow the basic flow of a book, but is there like a more methodical way?
There is, and it's not as complicated as it sounds. They suggest paying close attention to things like the table of contents,
Okay.
chapter titles,
Yeah.
even the introduction or preface.
Right.
These can give you clues about the structure and the key arguments.
Oh, they also say not to rely on those introductory elements too much, right?
It's like getting a sneak peek of a house from the outside. You get a sense of the layout, but you don't really know how each room works until you go inside.
I love that.
Yeah.
So we need to be active explorers, not just passive onlookers.
Exactly.
But how do we know what to look for once we're inside the book?
That's where things get even more interesting. They introduce us to these building blocks of understanding,
Okay.
terms, propositions, and arguments.
Okay. break those down for me one
Yeah.
by one. What do they mean by, like, coming to terms with an author?
It's like you want to make sure you're both speaking the same language, right?
Okay.
Like sometimes authors, they use words in very specific ways that
Hmm.
might be different from how we use them every day.
Okay, yeah.
They give this example of Adam Smith's of The Wealth of Nations.
Right.
Like you might think you know what wealth means,
Right.
but to Smith, it had a very particular, definition.
So it's like we have to decipher their code.
Yeah. Like figuring out their own vocabulary, their own dictionary almost.
Yeah. Okay.
And once you've done that, you can start to understand their propositions,
Propositions. Okay.
which are basically statements that can be true or false.
Gotcha.
And then you see how they build on each other to form arguments.
It's like those logic puzzles.
Yes.
You know? Where
Exactly.
you have to figure out which statements are true.
Right.
And use those to get the final answer.
Exactly. And by understanding how authors build their arguments,
Yeah.
we can start to evaluate them more critically. Like, do their conclusions actually follow from their premises?
Right. Right.
Or their holes in their reasoning? That kind of thing.
This is starting to feel like a detective game.
It is.
But also, it makes reading sound like a lot of work.
Well, yeah, it is more engaging than just passively, absorbing information.
Yeah.
But remember that analogy of intellectual fuel?
Oh, right. From earlier.
Reading for understanding, it's like fueling your mind with a gourmet meal.
Okay. Yeah.
It takes more effort to prepare it and to savor it, but it's so much more satisfying.
You're just grabbing a quick snack.
Exactly.
Okay. I'm with you.
Yeah.
And I guess, like with any skill, the more we practice active reading, the better we get.
Oh, absolutely. And Adler and Van Doren, they give us a whole roadmap for building those reading muscles,
Okay, cool.
They introduce all these different types of reading, each with its own set of techniques.
Wait, different types of reading.
Yeah?
I thought reading was just, reading.
Well, think about it, right? Like all the different types of books we read,
Okay,
a
yeah.
novel, a self-help book, a history textbook, those all need different approaches.
Okay, yeah.
So they break it down into three main types. Structural reading, which we talked about,
Right.
interpretative reading, and critical reading.
Okay, let's unpack those a bit. What's interpretive reading all about?
So interpretive reading is all about digging into the author's language,
Okay.
really understanding the nuance of their words and how they're using them to convey their ideas.
So it's not just what the words mean.
No.
But like how they're being used in context.
Exactly. It's all about the context, right?
Yeah.
And this is where, identifying those key terms and propositions is so important.
Right, okay.
You need to be able to see how those pieces fit together to form the author's argument.
And then critical reading, what does that look like?
Critical reading, that's where you put on your thinking cap and start evaluating those arguments. Do you agree with their conclusions? Are there flaws in their reasoning? What evidence do they have?
So it's like having a respectful debate with the author,
Yes.
challenging their ideas,
Yeah.
and then like forming your own opinions.
Exactly. The book encourages us to, talk back to the author.
Oh, I like that.
Right. Engage in this mental sparring match that really deepens understanding.
But how do we do that respectfully? Like, I don't want to be just, tearing apart everything they say.
That's a great question. And they actually give us some really helpful, rules for critical reading.
Okay.
One of them is to always try to understand the author's perspective,
Okay.
even if you don't agree with it,
So like trying to see the world through their eyes.
Yeah, why might they hold these views?
Okay. Yeah.
And once you've done that, then you can start to come up with your own counter arguments.
Right. Okay.
Providing your own evidence and reasoning to support your position.
It's like a game of intellectual chess.
Exactly.
That's awesome.
Yeah. It's a game that can be so rewarding,
Yeah.
Through critical reading, we not only deepen our understanding of the text,
Hmm.
but we also develop our own intellectual voice
Okay.
and become more discerning thinkers overall.
I like that.
Yeah,
Now, you mentioned different approaches for different types of books.
right.
So should we be reading a novel differently than, say, a history textbook?
Absolutely. They emphasize that not all books need the same level of scrutiny, right?
Okay, so how do we adjust our reading strategies? Like, how do we know which approach to use?
Well, with practical books, think self-help guides or business books.
Okay.
The focus should be on extracting actionable advice. What are the key takeaways?
Right, how can I use this?
Exactly. How can I apply this to my life, to my work?
So it's less about dissecting the arguments.
Right.
And more about finding, nuggets of wisdom.
Yeah, those golden nuggets that can help you make positive changes.
Okay, gotcha. And with more theoretical books,
Mm.
like philosophy or political theory.
Yeah, then the emphasis shifts to understanding the author's system of thought, right?
Right.
Like, what are their core beliefs?
Okay.
How do their arguments build on each other?
So it's like mapping out their intellectual landscape.
Exactly. And with fiction, the focus should be on experiencing the story,
Okay.
appreciating the beauty of the language,
Yeah.
connecting with the characters,
Right.
It's less about analyzing and more about immersing yourself.
That makes sense. Like, it's the difference between, analyzing a painting
Right.
and just enjoying its beauty.
Exactly. And speaking of expanding our horizons,
Yeah.
there's one more type of reading they talk about that I think is super fascinating.
Yeah. Okay.
It's called extrinsic reading.
Extrinsic reading. What's that all about?
It's about going beyond the book itself
Ah.
to get a deeper understanding.
Gotcha.
So you're reading a biography of, say, Abraham Lincoln.
Mhm.
Extrinsic reading would be like exploring other books about the Civil War,
Oh.
maybe reading some of Lincoln's speeches, or even visiting historical sites related to his life.
So it's about enriching our understanding by branching out, right?
Yeah,
Going beyond just that one text.
exactly. And Adler and Van Doren, they really stress how important this is.
Yeah. Huh?
Especially for understanding practical books,
Okay.
Say you're reading a book on personal finance.
Hmm.
Extrinsic reading might be researching different investment strategies,
Oh, okay.
reading articles about economic trends, or even talking to a financial advisor.
So it's connecting the theory with the real world.
Exactly.
Right,
And
yeah.
it can make the whole reading experience so much more engaging.
Yeah, totally. As we've been talking about all this,
Yeah.
it's hit me that this isn't just about becoming a better reader for ourselves. It
Right.
feels like there's a bigger picture here.
Oh, absolutely. They make this really powerful argument for reading as a skill that's essential for democracy.
Okay.
They believe that a well-informed citizenry is key to, making good decisions, participating in the democratic process, all of that.
They actually say that reading isn't just beneficial for democracy, but essential to its survival.
Mm-hmm.
Why is it that important?
Well, think about it, right?
Okay.
In a democracy, we need citizens to be able to think critically,
Right.
to
Yeah.
evaluate different perspectives, to make judgments about who to vote for, what policies to support, right?
So if people don't understand the issues.
Exactly. If they're easily swayed by misinformation or emotional appeals,
And the whole system is in trouble.
it becomes very fragile.
Like building a house on a shaky foundation.
Exactly.
Without a good understanding, our decisions are going to be unreliable.
And they talk about the dangers of indoctrination,
Okay.
which is basically just passively absorbing information, no questioning, no critical thinking.
So is active reading the antidote to that?
It is. By learning how to read actively, to think critically,
Yeah.
to evaluate arguments, we become way more discerning,
Okay.
We don't just accept everything we're told at face value.
So it's about developing our own intellectual independence.
Exactly. The ability to think for ourselves,
Yeah.
form our own opinions based on, reason and evidence.
And that's crucial for a healthy democracy.
It is. It allows us to have those tough conversations, to bridge divides,
Right.
to work together,
There was this part of the book about docility.
Oh, yeah.
And, that word usually has a negative connotation.
Like being submissive or something.
Yeah, exactly. But they offer a different perspective.
They do.
They say true docility isn't about being passive,
Right.
but about being teachable.
Exactly.
So it's more about having an open mind,
Yeah.
being willing to learn.
A willingness to learn even from people you disagree with.
It's about acknowledging that we don't have all the answers,
Mm-hmm. We don't.
that there's
Oh, yeah.
always more to learn,
Always.
and that even, the smartest people can be wrong sometimes.
Absolutely.
It's like intellectual humility, right?
It is. And that humility, that willingness to keep learning, it's so important.
So it's not enough to just be well-read.
No, it's not.
We need to be able to actually apply what we learn,
Yeah.
to think critically, to talk to others.
To engage in meaningful dialogue.
Exactly. It all comes back to that idea of reading for understanding.
Yeah. It's about moving beyond just accumulating facts
Mm-hmm.
and going for that deeper level of understanding.
The kind that allows us to connect ideas, evaluate, participate.
Exactly.
So for our listeners who want to, become more active readers,
Mhm.
where should they start? What's the most important takeaway?
I think the key is to approach reading with intention
Okay.
and curiosity, Choose books that challenge you,
Okay.
that make you think differently, that spark something.
And don't be afraid to really get into it, right?
Right. Mark up those books, take notes, ask questions.
Make it a conversation.
Exactly.
And remember, this is a journey.
It is.
It's not about reaching some, finish line.
Enjoy the process. Keep exploring.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
This has been such a fascinating deep dive.
It has.
Thank you so much for sharing your expertise. I think we've really unlocked the secrets of, how to read a book.
It's been my pleasure. I hope everyone feels inspired to pick up a book and really dive in.
To all our listeners, thank you for joining us on the Deep Dive.
Yes, thank you.
We'll be back next time with another deep dive into a brand new topic.
Can't wait.
Until then, happy reading, everyone.